So yes, we are live. Welcome everybody. My name is Rob van Duin. I'm head of the Office of Studium Generale, the office at Maastricht University that organizes lectures and debates, often also in this hall. And I'm asked by the members of the Iranian community here at Maastricht University to moderate this evening. And I'm happy to. We had a lecture by Studium Generale of Peyma Jafari not too long ago. So the topic was already discussed and it was really interesting. But I think it's good that we don't stop and keep on talking about the issues that are present at this moment in Iran. I was told I'm having slides, so before we really start, we start with the word of welcome by Rector Magnificus Pamela Habibovic.
In the name of the whole community, I'd like to thank you for coming today, and a special thank you to our speaker. I know that for those of you from Iran, or with family there, these are incredibly difficult, tense times. I want to tell you that your tremendous courage and your fierce determination to forge a better world has inspired all of us. It certainly has inspired me. The spirit in which you are fighting every day to make the Iran of tomorrow a beacon of hope, an inspiration to people around the world, that spirit is what can make tomorrow better than today. I don't believe that the arc of the moral universe inevitably bends towards justice. I think it is bent there by courageous and compassionate people, like the amazing women in the front line of the Iranian protests. I believe the ultimate victory of this movement will be the creation of something new and beautiful. The most inspiring gift of those risking their lives in Iran is yet to come. I wish you courage, strength, and creativity. And of course, I wish you all an interesting and inspiring evening.
What an important and nice start of the this evening, underlining how the university also thinks about these issues, and indeed I couldn't have said it better. I was wondering before I came here to actually ask you the question and ask myself the question: why are we here? Because it's quite difficult from afar to look in Iran. But I think a lot already of that has been said here now by our rector. This evening is organized by the Diversity and Inclusivity Office and the Iranian members of the community. And it is about the nature and the development of the protests that started in Iran in September 2022 after the death of Mahsa Amini. What are the causes of the protests and how did they evolve? What does the slogan "Women, Life, Freedom" signify? And what, or should we do, or should be the role of the European countries and institutions supporting the protests? Questions that we address this evening with three speakers with an Iranian background, one in Sweden actually at the moment, so we're going to see her, or she's going to join shortly through Zoom in this hall and of course projected on the screen. Two others here working in the Netherlands for a long time already. They each speak for about 15 minutes. We save all the questions for the Q&A afterwards, so no questions after the each speaker, but at the end after they all three spoke. Questions can also be asked online in the chat. So there's a moderator here who looks at those questions, Amy, that I can ask if there's any interesting discussion going on. She's going to be selective, of course. But I'm sure there's a lot to say also online. So welcome to those watching from home. The first guest I want to introduce to you is Magdia Golru. Hello, Magdia. Can we hear you? You can hear us. We don't hear you yet. Yes, we can hear you. You hear me?
Yeah. Right.
Good.
Yes,
That's good.
yes.
Magdia Golru is an Iranian journalist and women's rights activist. Her writing focuses on the experiences of women in prison and oppression, as well as issues of democracy and development. Golru was a student leader, active in the creation of student associations and women's groups in the university to protect the rights of students who had been barred from studying because of their political or religious beliefs. She formed a group called the Council for the Defense of the Right to Education, which won the 2010 Academic Freedom Award. Her activism led her to be harassed and persecuted. She was arrested several times and in 2009 sentenced by a Tehran Revolutionary Court to 2 years and 4 months in prison on charges of propaganda against the state, something used nowadays too, I think, when they want to convict those who protest, and assembly and collusion with the intent to disrupt national security. In 2016, Golru was arrested again and held in solitary confinement after attending a rally to protest the acid attacks on 3 women. She was released 93 days later after a global outcry from numerous human rights groups. You see, you can also be active, and maybe this is an important message that things help when you are numerous. In 2020, Golru was welcomed as writer in residence by the Swedish city of Sandviken. During her residency, she hopes to complete her university education and finish a book she secretly started during her time in prison. She works as a freelancer with many international media outlets like the BBC, Radio Liberty, and Radio Zamaneh, covering politics and human rights in Iran. Magdia Golru, the floor is yours. You're talking about the first topic of the evening, and we're actually following the slogan, "Women is your." The stage is yours.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for inviting me and giving me this opportunity for talking about the modern and feminist revolution in Iran. Women life freedom movement that is one of the biggest change, not just in Iran, in Middle East, and the attitude of the Muslim people and Muslim women. I know my friends continue on talking about the freedom and life. That's why I want to focus on the women and why women are in the first line in the demonstration, and many of them start this revolution, and why we say it's a feminist revolution. Let me share my story with you, and in this way we can understand each other and win this revolution. Okay, you see this, okay. This is democracy indeed. Just we very rapid look at that because I know my friend, dear Turaj or dear Somalia, talk about democracy in Iran. But just I want to know where is Iran, and it's a dark red country. It means there's a lack of democracy in Iran. And the next one is about death penalty, and Iran is a dark red. It shows Iran is one of the country with the highest death penalty. And the next one is hide marriage. And Iran is one of the powerful countries and freedom of speech. Iran is one of the powerful country about the not free. It's one of the country that there is a no free for freedom. And another one is global gender gap report. It's related to my presentation. Iran, between 148 countries, is 144, and it means one of the country with the worst situation for women. Uh, why this movement starts and how continue until now after more than 5 months? In Iran, uh, we have many kind of limitation for women, and so it's not just mandatory hijab. Many people think it's just mandatory hijab, and women start to do something against mandatory hijab, but it's more than that. And women's hijab is controlled by the morality police, but it's more than morality police and mandatory hijab. Women are second-class citizens. Why I say that? We are even deprived of our basic rights. Women legally cannot be president or cannot be judge. I know it's not, it's not just about the women. Women are second class, but men isn't first class. Mullah covered everything in Iran. It's important, Uh, we have a bad situation for all the people in Iran, not just women, but the women's situation is horrible in comparison with others. And of course, LGBTQ plus instead of women. As I say, women cannot be a president, women cannot be a judge because according to the Islamic rules, we as women can make a big decision because we are very, very emotional person. That's why it's better men make a big decision for us. And it's not just about some big thing like president or judge. Women cannot work without the permission of their father or their husband also. We are not allowed to decide about traveling, education, where to live, and how to dress. So obviously, when we can't make a decision about this kind of thing, how we can be a president or judge. And even for some kind of job, we need to the permission, but about another kind of job is a job it's completely forbidden. For example, uh, some works and some job that is considered as a some job that just men can do. So this kind of job is completely forbidden for women. And but it's more than about dressing or job or something like that. Abortion has always been illegal. In the patriarchy and according to the Islamic rules, the women's main role is to be a mother. The law in Iran will not let women have custody of children after divorce. Father is the child's owner, and if he dies, the grandfather is the owner. And if the children don't have the grandfather, the Islamic court let them, they can have custody of their children or not. So all the decision about women is with a man or mullah. In fact, women cannot even divorce without their husband's permission or the order of the Islamic court. And who is the Islamic court? Mullah. Women are not allowed to think, not allowed to dance, and not allowed to do some kind of sports, even go to the stadium to watch the football match or ride a bike. And women have to wear hijab everywhere, everywhere, except their homes. Mandatory hijab for children is another part of things that is completely against human rights. I want to show some picture and some video about children. But let me show you its uh, morality hijab. Maybe you can't imagine when I talk about the morality hijab. It's morality hijab, and all the time uh, say about what which kind of dress is suitable, or about your face, your hair. And maybe when you look at these women, you think it's they have hijab, but according to the Islamic rules in Iran, according to the governmental Islam, it's not suitable hijab. So morality hijab uh, everywhere try to correct our hijab, and I several times I was arrested by this. Look at this video. It's really horror movie. You think it's strange and it's not common, but it's common thing in Iran. Most of the women doesn't believe to hijab, and not without hijab, just the lack of hijab. The police face with them in this way, with violence. It starts from school, from that time we are very young. I remember when I was in this age, I think if all the time our teachers uh, told us, if you don't have enough hijab, and if you have, for example, somebody see your hair, you will burn in hell. So I know if you awareness of me or some other women like me in Iran or in Afghanistan or some other countries like us, you don't want to go to hell, and you believe your teachers, and sometimes you believe your parents, because if you ask some of the small girls, do you like your hijab? I told you yes in that time, and I know many young girls say yes, we like hijab. Why? Because of this scary, because we don't like go to hell. And sometimes our parents tell us, if you wear hijab, for example, my father told me, if you wear hijab, I like you. And if you don't wear hijab, I don't like you. All of us prefer to be loved with our parents. That's why I wanna say, if you see sometimes children in the propaganda movie of the Taliban or Iran regimes, don't believe it's really their heart. The teenager is uniform, and it's misuse from children with chador and with hijab, and all of them have to pray for the leader, Khomeini, and really they believe he's the best leader in the world, and without the regime, uh, we will go to hell. So it's the propaganda started from children. Uh, when I start the women life freedom revolution, women start to demonstration because one of them was killed in jail because of hijab, Mahsa Amini. And as I say, according to the rules, we as the women in Iran were very, very angry. And after they killed Mahsa, and they show the women who start to cut their hair. Maybe you have seen somewhere they start to cut hair in front of the others. But I want to mention this problem as the mandatory confess. This woman that you see cut their hair in front of the other, and everybody claps and say, "Wow, you are very brave." Arrested 2 days after this video, and she has to sit in front of the camera and say something against herself. And it's very common in Iran. And I know it's one of the things that in the life and freedom my friends mention. And it's very, very common. And all the time, prisoner have to sit in front of the camera and say something against them. But I want to look at this video. It's a very short video, but I think when you see them as a brave people, you know why you should support them. Or they start to burn and dance with their scarf, but it's not just dancing and burning a scarf. A scarf is symbol of patriarchy in Iran. Scarf is symbol of Islamic regime in Iran. And I don't know how I can explain how much they are brave and do this dance with a scarf. Just look at them. Women start this revolution because of the lack of freedom, because they don't want to be a second citizen in Iran. And that's why they are, I think they, motivation were uh, many years uh, living without freedom. It started not just 5 months ago, it started many years ago after Islamic Revolution. But those years, protesters were minority. But now, majority of people are against Islamic regime, and majority of women know about their life and know about their opportunity. Many women go to university, and that's why women want to be as an employee and want to be a president, want to be a lawyer, want to go to as a teacher, as a professor. But in Iran now, 80% of women are have a job. In comparison with other countries, even Middle East, it's really worse. And that's why I think women are in front line for this revolution, and they try to make a renaissance in Iran and in Middle East. Because in other countries, many people believe hijab and Islam is part of our culture in Middle East and in Iran. And women in Iran start to destroy this cliche. And now feminists and human rights defender in Western country find no, it wasn't culture in Iran. And women want to change this idea. And I know women continue their revolution in Iran and make a renaissance after a long time in Iran. Thank you for this opportunity, and thank you to let me talk about the women in Women Life Freedom.
Thank you indeed, Magye Goru. The connection was a bit bad. I'm not sure if during the evening there can be changed. It can be changed, but thanks also to the pictures, I think we could follow this story. It really shocks me to think that, like on an ordinary day as today, a little bus would stop and just grab a woman and take it away. Imagine that happening, and you have no idea actually why. And that was something that happens in Iran every day. It's hard for me to imagine. So thank you for explaining us why women are in the front. I'm not sure if I have to move the slides. Yes. Because we're moving to the next speaker and our next guest. The next guest is Professor Turaj Atobaki. He is a senior research fellow at the International Institute of Social History and emeritus professor of social history of the Middle East and Central Asia at Leiden University. He first studied theoretical physics and then history. Atobaki worked at Utrecht University, University of Amsterdam, and Leiden University. Atobaki's earlier research interest encompassed historiography, ethnic studies, and the practice of authoritarianism in Iran and Turkey, and everyday Stalinism in the Soviet Central Asia and the Caucasus. However, in the last 10 years, his research focused more on labor history. He has coordinated a project on the 100 years social history of labor in the Iranian oil industry, founded by the Netherlands Organization for Scientific Research, NWO. Turaj Atobaki has written extensively on the 19th, 20th century history of Iran, Turkey, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. His latest book, Victims of Their Faith, The Lives and Fates of Iranian Political Activists and Migrant Laborers in the Interwar Soviet Union, co-author Lana Ravandi Vadai, and forthcoming is Social History of Oil Industry in Iran. So no wonder he's here, and happy that he's here because of his background to talk about the second aspect of the slogan, Women Life. Thank you.
Delighted to be here, very delighted to be here. And I was very much touched by the very supporting, inspiring talk of Rector Magnificus. You are very lucky to study here. This is such a brilliant rector. My gratefulness goes to Studium Generale, to Logistics Department, and very, very much to Daria, with his proficiency, efficiency, organizing this talk. More than 4 months ago, with the state murdering of Jina Mahsa Amini, an uprising began in Iran with the slogan, "No to compulsory hijab." And with a remarkable speed, it turned into a revolutionary movement and demanded the overthrow of the regime of Islamic Republic in Iran. This revolutionary movement, with its ups and downs, is now aiming to find out the ground for a full-fledged revolution in the country. Revisiting the revolutionary movement, later better called Women, Life, Freedom, we identify this movement with 5 criteria. First, the prominent agency of the movement goes to the youth, especially young girls. The remarkable presence of women in pioneering the revolutionary movement with the history-making slogans, Women, Life, Freedom, reflects the reality of the time in which the contribution of women in leading profound social changes, not only in Iran, but all over the world, in equal to our peer societies. The prominence of youth agency is not due to generational differences, but it's rooted in 2 non-comprehensive value system, not non-compromise value system. That's not only the youth, but also mother, father of these children beholding in their social life. So it's not a matter of generation. They call it the decades of 80s, of 60s, of 70s. Is a value system is different. That is matter. The value system is a prime conflict with the value system of the ruler, of the military jurisprudence system of the Islamic Republic of Iran. People and ruler live in 2 different worlds without having a common language to understand each other, and without any possible presence of mediatory ground, mianjinist. The second criteria. The second criteria is the continuity of movement with its own ups and downs, not in a linear form, but in a step-by-step or ladder form. Some of you just studied physics, you know the quantum. Is it not linear? Without illusion, the movement is without illusion of victory in nearby. The movement aware of the roughness of the road in its development seeks to create diverse and multiple form of protest means. Gathering in the street, throwing stones on the repressive forces of the regime, a strike, silence march, throwing turban and setting fire to some places of religious institution, Ammam Parani, and many other forms that you can see in everyday life of these movements. But in all these forms, the protester avoided restoring of violence to violence, except in a self-defense form. In this movement, contrary to the persistent behavior of the coercive forces who are armed and lurking the streets day and night, 24 hours, for the protesters, rallies are in different form. For the protesters, protest is part of their everyday life. They live and they protest. Two different approach. In other words, if you look at the protester, they return home from daily work or study, get their supper, and then go to the street or to the rooftops to join the protest as they plan. In universities, students, while study, continue to organize gatherings where they debate on the future of the movement. And in some peripheral provinces, the Friday Maastricht become the midpoint of the protest. Indeed, people live and fight alongside. Therefore, the one who is afraid of fatigue is the ruler, not the ruled. Third criteria. The revolutionary movement has been very radical so far. It starts with the slogans, "No to compulsory hijab," but very soon, with a plan to overthrow the Islamic Republic, it shows its significant distance, not only with all those who adhere to the reform of the government, Islah Taliban, but also in absolute opposition to political Islam in all its forms. Fourth criteria. Fourth characteristic of this movement is in geographical extent. This movement has not been limited to big cities such as Tehran, Isfahan, Shiraz, Tabriz, or Mashhad. It has spread out to 4 corners of the country, to small cities and large villages. Very, very unique in the region. In this geographic expansion, the revolutionary movement includes Iranian with all ethnic diversities. Kurds, Baluchis, Turks, Arabs, with all their cultural, linguistic, and religious ties and diversities. Contrary to the government black propaganda that scares the Iranian becoming Syrian in the event of any protest, such a high degree of territorial solidarity has been formed among Iranians is unique in the history of this nation. The fifth criteria. The fifth characteristic of the movement in its achievement beyond the border of the country, goes beyond the border of the country. Thanks to the life of millions of Iranian refugees and immigrants around the world, a diasporic movement has been formed. This movement does not limit itself to just supporting the demand of the Iranian inside the country, but by presenting a complementary discourse, it helps the people inside the country to strengthening and reaching their demand. The most successful and obvious example of this role of the diasporic movement is the organization of very large gatherings and marches in Europe, Canada, and United States. More than 50,000 people participated in Toronto meeting, and more than 80,000 people participated in Berlin demonstration. As mentioned, a step like this on the part of diasporic movement are not only supporters of the revolutionary movement in Iran, but also have the ability to influence the movement inside the country with its forms of organization and discourse. Those of you are familiar with the Benedict Anderson notion of long-distance nationalism, I wrote an article reacting to that. I said, now is not a period of long-distance solidarity and nationalism, but short distance of localism, global and localism. The time of long-distance solidarity is gone with the wind. We are living in different age now. The Iranian diasporic movement engaged in two levels. Not only committed to expanding the support of the people of the world for the women, life, freedom, which is unique in its kind, but also to lobby government and many international institutions. The support of the people of the world for the Iranian is without doubt unprecedented in the history of the region. One of the reasons for this exceptional support is the slogan, Women, Life, Freedom, which can be universal and understandable for all women in the world. The struggle of the Iranian women is getting closer and closer to the struggle of the women all over the world to achieve equality, and therefore it is understandable for the women of Europe, Latin America, Africa, and all over the world. We are observing the solidarity of artists, intellectuals, academics, celebrities of the world with them. Some of them, like the Iranian women, cut their hair. Some sing the song of Shervin Hajipur. By the way, you know that last week Shervin won the best protest prize of Grammy. At the level of the government, this diasporic movement is very, very influential. With the international institutions, governments. Until today, the Iranians have never had such a support from the European Union, the United Nations, and so many governments in their fight against tyranny. Iranians certainly expect more support, but the impact of this level of support cannot be overstated. With more than 4 months old of the revolutionary movement, one surely can trace the insistence on changing the political system. But more than highlighting the political achievements, everybody talks about when they leave, when they go, when they toppled. But more than that, let me to share my reading with you. More than that, it's necessary to highlight the amalgamation of causal cultural development. That is matter, which in the forerunner of a new civilizational turn for the Iranian, like the constitutional revolution of 1905-06, is a civilization turn for the Iranian. In a sense, this movement led to the birth of a cultural revolution in Iran, more than political or social revolution. One of the components of this cultural revolution is that for the first time in the history of Iran, we are witnessing the birth of a significant movement of anti-clericalism, جنبش ضد آخوندی, anti-clericalism, without necessarily being anti-religious. It's not anti-religious. جنبش ضد دینی نیست. It's not anti-religious, it's anti-clericalism. A movement in opposition to the mullahs, as well as the link between religion and the government, without ignoring the religious right of the believers. The slogans, with hijab, without hijab, go for the revolution. You hear this in the streets of many cities in Iran. This shows that this movement, the people in their entirety, where they are believer, non-believer, agnostic, atheist, deist, are against the practicing of power by the clergies. This is the first time in Iranian history, anti-clericalism. And let me to share my idea that the first time in the history of the region, West Asia. This should be taken into account. Very, very important. The impact of this cultural revolution will undoubtedly go beyond the border of Iran. Let not think provincial. With its historical and civilization past, Iran has a very important place in West and Central Asia. During the last 100 years, Iran has left its mark on all social and political movement and all social development and change in the region. The Constitutional Revolution of the 1905-1909 immediately and directly affected the demand of the constitutional movement, reformism and revolution in North Africa, Central Asia, Caucasus, Afghanistan, and the Ottoman Empire. First was Iran. In a search that I have published long time ago, Constitutionnalistes Sans Frontières, this is my book, I have shown how the thought of Iranian constitutionalists traveled beyond Iranian borders, covered the land in order to share their experience of the constitutional revolution with the people of the region and learn from them, not only to teach, but to learn from them. These are reciprocal ties. In this regard, we should also think about the movement of nationalization of Iranian oil in late 1940s and early 1950s. This is also worth mentioning. And finally, don't forget the impact of the Islamic Revolution of 1979. The negative impact, of course, I should say. The Islamic Revolution of 1979 paved the way for the formation of a movement ending with the consolidation of political Islam in both in Shiite and in Sunni form. In other words, Iran became the birthplace of radical political Islam in the region and beyond. Do you want more similarity, more impact of Iran in the region? I take you to the Green Movement, 2009. The Green Movement of 2009 took place before the event in the Arab world called Arab Spring, initiated in Iran first. And then impacted the subsequent protests in North Africa and other countries in the region. In this sense, I'm not saying that Iranians are unique. Far from me to say we are unique. We are not unique. We are like many others. But we created something in the region. In this sense, there is no doubt the current movement with the slogans women, law, freedom will have a huge impact on different communities in the region. You can hear the slogans in Istanbul already, in Baghdad, in Kabul. You know, after the fall of the last regime, for a period was nothing happening. Now you can see the Afghan women are coming, taking part in the protest. So there is something happening. So at the same time, this movement shows a very vivid break with political Islam, very significant for the region. And it's against the interference of political Islam in everyday life of people. For this reason, is not an exaggeration to emphasize that and to claim that if the birthplace of political Islam in 1979 was Iran, surely now is going to become its graveyard. گورستان اسلام رادیکال سیاسی. Okay, so far so good. But let me to talk about challenges. Any social movement, if you are engaged in studying social movements, you cannot deny the challenges you're facing. What's happening in Ukraine, what's happening in Belarus, what's happening in Sudan, what's happening in Somalia, any countries, you name it. There are challenges facing the movement in Iran. I don't want to give a rosy picture of what's happening without mentioning these challenges. A look at the challenges ahead. How many challenges, what type of challenges we have? What has been achieved so far is fine, but challenges cannot be ignored. There's no doubt that this movement is facing ups and downs to achieve its goal. It takes time. Don't think it's a matter of 2 months. We go. No. Stay here. Finish your study first. We are at the beginning of the process of the end of Islamic Republic regime in Iran. We are in a very, very beginning phase. 43 years long, creating crisis and leaving crisis. This is very important. Buhranza wa buhranzi, creating crisis and living in crisis, has demonstrated vividly that the Islamic regime does not have the capacity to manage the deep, overgrowing crisis of environmental, economic, political, social, regional security, and international relation for a long or even for a medium-term perspectives. Okay, understanding this background, that Iranian regime is incapable of creating any fundamental reform, not cosmetic, but fundamental reform. Now let me to mention few challenges. First and foremost is the government's relentless repression. The theological militaristic government has used all available means in a bloody suppression of the revolutionary movement and has brought various police, revolutionary guards, military security ranks to the field. The fact that some of the circles in the ruling elite even consider the implementation of a scorched earth plan. This is a reality. طرح سرزمین سوخته. But the question is, how in the implementation of the repression, how the implementing this type of widespread repression could go hand in hand with a certain supposedly top-down reform. How the government can, on one hand, rely on these type of repression, and the other hand goes to the create economic efficiency as well as creating more legitimacy to survive. It's not possible. If the regime could implement necessary reform along with widespread repression, how is possible to survive and not lead the country to a non-state statute? So there are, some countries, they opted for this scenario. Go to the end, suppress everything, and lead the country to a non-state status. Very, very dangerous. So we should be realistic. Some people, they think, Vladimir Putin is going to the same direction. Second challenge. The revolutionary movement has not yet been able to witness the significant section of the supporters of the regime distancing themselves from it and leaving the regime alone. When you talk about the revolution, it's a very common known that, when the revolution comes, it's the people cannot accept the rule and the ruler cannot impose the rule. So this is the contradiction, the contradiction between the ruler and ruled. So far what you expect, a large segment of the establishment, political establishment, to distance itself from the regime and comes to the people. This is not happening yet. Lately, last 2-3 days ago, we saw that the last prime minister of the regime turned its back and said, we are for the change of this regime. Very, very significant step. That was 2 days ago. So that might be a sign, making the regime weaker and weaker. Third challenge, and very important, is the transition from, this is for the Iranian, a transition from what Iranians don't want to what really they want. This is a legitimate question. We know what you don't want, but we want to know what you want from this revolution. Over the past 4 months, the decentralized leadership of the movement has been able to stabilize it, but not the need for a centralized, now the need for a centralized leadership is very much in the stake and very important. And let me to say my final word after all these challenges. If we want to find historical resemblances with the Iranian contemporary past, the current revolutionary movement is more, this is my reading, is more similar to the Iranian constitutional revolution of the beginning of the 20th century than with the revolution of 1979. 99 that brought the Islamic regime in power. Why this similarity? I can see this similarity. Why? Not only in terms of the desire of the modernization and progress, but even in a form of organization, you find many similarities of this movement to the constitutional movement of more than 100 years ago. The Constitutional Revolution originated without leadership, but with a charter. The constitutionals, they had a charter. In their charter, united all the constitutionalists, they called for the house of justice, the rule of law, conditioning the practice of monarchy by law, and they wanted modernity embedded in individual autonomy and critical thinking, along with modernization. So, social justice and economic development, two components, modernity and modernization, which is not equal. The Constitutional Charter led them for the inauguration of the first National Council of the Iranian, that is National Parliament, more than 100 years ago, and practicing for the first time in a region modernity and modernization. Looking back to the Constitutional Revolution, what we need, and we can see these days, that the Iranian, they have a lot of homeworks to do, loads of homeworks. I wish success for them. Thank you.
Thank you. Is it on? Or yes, this one is. Thank you, Professor Atobaki, for these 5 criteria, the challenges, and the homework. I hope not only the Iranians, but also the other people involved here in the rest of the world. Maybe also for these people here in this hall. Leads us to the last one of this universal slogan, as you mentioned, women, life, we get to freedom. And to talk about this issue, we invited Somayeh Deban. She's a PhD researcher in cross-sector partnership and coalition building in Rotterdam. She's Dutch-ified Iranian with a dream. She wants to live in a world with true personal freedom of choice, equality of opportunity, and the ability for people to thrive. And this balanced with personal responsibility to contribute to collective good. To bring this dream to reality, Somayeh has developed a synergistic model which she dubbed verbinding. And verbinding is the Dutch term for interconnectedness with an emotional hint towards interrelatedness and interdependencies. Verbinding brings seemingly unlikely allies to not only create a vision, but also to collectively implement the associated strategy and generate impact at scale. The essence of verbinding is that positive impact arises when we contribute harmony and progress. As a political engaged PhD candidate and a human rights and responsibility advocate living in exile, Somayeh is rolling this model out with the ambition of replacing the Dutch polder model with the synergistic model. She has designed this model after interviewing a diverse group of people, from political activists to religion converts, from widows of war to poets in exile, from victims of rape to professors of academia and practice. From defining an action point for development aid as it is, advocating for a future that is cross-sectorial, Somayeh is challenging the manifestations of one with everything. One model that can be applied at personal, family, community, organizational and societal level to close the gap of indifference and build on our differences. Please welcome Somayeh.
Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be standing here, and I will be speaking about different dimensions of freedom. And I try to be wittingly using the term unveiling, given the context of Iranian revolution. I want to start with this image. Somewhere in this photo, I'm there. I'm there, but I actually don't exist because I'm covered head to toe, and despite the fact that this is a family vacation, if you show it to any other person except the ones who were there, they would not be able to recognize me. The only people that I didn't cover their photos, their faces, is my dad, who passed away in 2012, and I wasn't able to attend his funeral because I was living here in exile. And the other person is my mom, who is my backrock. Here, at this moment when this picture was taken, I felt I was on top of the world. I had all the freedom in the world, and I could live my life the way I want. But that was just my understanding of freedom at that moment. Sometimes these conversations get a bit emotional. Here, in this photo, is again me and my mom. And the naughty woman she is to hop on a swing, I went along. And again, I felt this is freedom. I can hop on a swing and enjoy it with my mother. What else do I need in the world? But that was, again, only my understanding of freedom at that moment in that context. And with this introduction, this evening, I'm going to talk about different dimensions of freedom. But beside what Rob told you about my model and me being a Dutchified Iranian, I want to tell you a little bit more about my convictions and what I want to do and why I'm standing here. Back in 2006, I wrote an article that rape is not an individual incident. Rape is a social fact. The whole society is responsible for what happens to women or other victims of rape. I also wrote about my BA, my bachelor degree thesis, was about collective identity and coping mechanisms. There was a time that I interviewed different victims of war between Iran and Iraq, Iranian women, who lost a male figure in their life, whether they lost their father or their brother or their husband, somebody who played that role, that figurative role of male, of being responsible. As you heard from Mahdi's presentation, a woman is always quote unquote owned by a man in terms of their legal representativeness. So that's why I wanted to understand, how did these women cope with losing somebody who is there to be their support and protect them? And the response that I gathered was that they defined their identity collectively, and instead of being just a widow of someone, they became widows of martyrs. And we see this collective identity, this usage of collective identity in the way that mothers who lost their children throughout these protests throughout the years, مادران لال، پارک لاله, for instance, the mothers of a certain park in Tehran, that they would go because they lost their children throughout these protests. And we also see it how in current protest, parents who lose a child, they go to the funeral of another child of another parent. So this way, the collective identity continues and it becomes a coping mechanism. I wrote about public forgiveness in 2010, right after the Green Movement, and where a lot of people, a lot of Iranians were shot dead in the streets. And I can tell you at the time it was not received very well, because the Iranian community inside Iran and outside was not ready for it, was not open to considering that if we want to move forward, if we want to build up on each other's, what we have, is to start by forgiving each other for the mistakes, for opening the room for amnesty for the people who committed crimes. But that was not perceived very well. And public forgiveness has also a lot to do with freedom and the different dimensions of it, taking responsibility for the actions that we've committed. Bilingualism is also related to freedom. Our ethnic minorities do not have the right to teach the language of their region to their children at schools. And I myself, my parents, both of them were multilingual, but they never spoke those languages with us because they didn't want us to get into the trouble of having an accent. And at the time, luckily not anymore, if back in the days, if you had an accent from a certain area, you would be treated differently within the society. And for me, it became very important to have the freedom to teach different languages to our children. And now, having 2 children myself, they are trilingual, and I feel that freedom to be able to teach the language you want, your mother tongue, your father tongue, is quite important. The other part is about political representation of women. Again, Matthew touched upon this subject a lot. I went back to Iran in between 2008 and 2009 and worked for UN, and there I investigate what is the reason for Islamic Republic for not signing the UN Convention on Women's Rights, which is called CEDAW. And interestingly enough, on my first day working for UN handed me over to intelligence service of Iran and said, this woman is coming here to research women's rights, so you'd better have a good track of her. So back in the day, without my own knowledge, I was handed over by UN to intelligence service, which was directly connected to IRGC. And at the end of my research, after interviewing several people who were pro and against Iran joining this convention, I came up with this idea that there are 2 types of women in politics. The one is women of parties. They are nothing different than what the party wants to put forward in terms of their agenda. Them being a woman has no impact, has no reason but just to be pushing forward the ideas, the existing ideas of the certain party. And in Iran, there is only one party, and the party of the supreme leader. And then there is the other group, parties of women, who never get the chance to be represented officially in parliament in context of Iran or in other places. So we need to make a distinction about who is representing who in what capacity, basically. Closer to Wayne is the title I gave to the article I wrote about assassinations conducted by Islamic Republic at different times. It was at the time that an Iranian was assassinated here in the Netherlands, and by the agents of Islamic Republic, interestingly enough, connected to the gang leader in the Netherlands, Taghi. And for me, it was also an understanding that how at the time of my upbringing, when I went to school, the name of the school was Khaled Islamboli, and Khaled Islamboli is an assassin, was a terrorist. Or my brother went to Nawab Safavi school, and Nawab Safavi is also another terrorist. But these people are praised in the Islamic Republic. Assassination and killing people who are in opponent to you is something that the Islamic Republic praises. And that made it even closer to the vein for me that we are raised with these concepts without even being aware of it consciously. Gender justice was the difference between how does the Iranian government see gender justice, and how even the women who tried to bring about change, the supreme leader stopped them. And this other article was when the Rouhani, the previous president of Iran, was elected. And it really made me angry that we, as the Iranian community, kept going back to the choice between bad and worse. And for me, it was a form of a rape that we've been denying for ourselves, that we say, it's okay, let's choose the less conservative one and go with that. And for me, again, going back to the article I wrote about rape, this was a form of rape that at the political level we were enduring, and we kept denying it at personal level. And the verbinding is the outcome of this. This is a brief sample of articles I've written. The verbinding is the outcome of researches that I've done in different domains and conversations that I have had with different people. And when the protests started in 2002, at the very beginning, I encouraged by our here, I mean the Dutch Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister Hoekstra, to take a different action, take a different approach towards the Iranian protest, instead of just condemning it, really and truly taking decisive action about Iran. Unfortunately, he didn't do it, but at least he acknowledged of the recipient of this letter. So my activities towards what's happening in Iran continued in form of participating in political cafes with members of the parliament back in November 2002, or speaking at the Dutch Women Council also in 2002, and very recently speaking with one of the members of the Senate, Eerste Kamer, about what's happening in Iran and why Islamic Republic is not the same as any other government that existed in the history, and therefore we need a different approach when we want to talk about what's happening in Iran and what actions we need to take. As Turej referred to, that we know what we do not want. We do not want to radicalize a political Islam in Iran. We don't want a clerical approach to our lives and based on religion. But what do we want? So that's the question we are trying to answer. And for this talk, and I see that we've run quite over time with the planning, so I try to keep it quite brief. I will talk about the different dimensions of freedom, which are liberty, equality, and accountability, and I will also briefly touch upon what we can learn from the Dutch liberalism. So again, briefly here, me by the sea of Caspian Sea, and again thinking, yeah, even with full hijab, you can go to the sea and enjoy it as if that's an enjoyment. And here is me. It's not very visible on the text, at least from where I'm looking, is that I'm standing by a sign that says a place for men. And me thinking, oh, if I stand there, I'm taking my own space over men. But again, alas, that was only my understanding of the moment about what is freedom and what is my space. And this is me when I just turned 20 and being engaged to my first boyfriend. So that was the level that if you want to be with someone, if you want to have a boyfriend, you have to get married to them right away. No meeting, no greeting beforehand. And as you can see, comparing to this picture and how I look now, I was a lot thinner, and the reason for that was that I was on a 28 days hunger strike to convince my dad that this is the guy I want to marry to. And I thought I'm standing my ground, that this is the level of freedom I want to have. And it took me over 20 years to realize that the choice I made was not truly my choice. I made a selection based on the criteria I knew my dad would approve, even though I still had to go on a strike for it. But I had self-censored my own choices. So getting to that true free choice is not something we can say, oh, I have the freedom, I make that choice. There is a lot of underlying subconscious element that we really need to unveil, and I hope to share some of it with you today. So what are the different dimensions of freedom? As I briefly mentioned, there are 3 parts, and without technology that is available to us, our whole perception about freedom is changed. There is a new social contract that we can say whatever we want. Of course, on social media I'm referring to, and that's given that you are giving away part of your privacy and freedom by signing up to these social medias. And freedom has been repackaged as right to choose. But the true choice, as I gave some examples, is really hard to come by. When it comes to our housing here, even in the Netherlands, do we have a real choice? When it comes to the job market, do we have a real choice? Or when we want to choose our representatives or who we want to be with? And that's also something that the populist voice in the West, at least, has been using it quite a lot, that we want to go and get back control. It wasn't too long ago that somebody became the president of the biggest economy, the most powerful country in the world, by saying, make America great again, so getting back that control. And the same with Brexit, that we wanted it, or the populists in the Netherlands who were advocating for Nexit, that's also about gaining back control. And in dimensions of freedom, liberty is to express ourselves on, it is defined that we want to express ourselves on social media 24/7, and this makes us feel, oh, I'm free. I have the freedom. I can say whatever I want, whenever I want, to whomever I want, and actually without any consequences. And this is not a guarantee that we are actually free. Liberty is not equal to freedom, although we, in our conversations, we use them interchangeably, but they are not. Liberty is the foundation of freedom because it gives us the power to speak, to think, and to be. I think, therefore I am. So that's the liberty is the element that gives us that power to be. But we also need more dimensions to our freedom, to secure it for many and to protect it from the powerful. Without equal respect for rights of others, my liberty, our liberty, is merely a license to just say what we think is the right thing to say. Equality is the second dimension to recuperate the rights for others. Just as free speech is not alone sufficient to define freedom, neither does equality guarantee that the individual has the agency over the situation. We can be equal but separated. If we want to be truly free, then liberty and equality need to be enhanced by a third dimension, and that is accountability. Liberty empowers the individual, equality is required for reciprocity, and accountability combines both of the first and second element to create an environment in which freedom is not divorced from responsibility. This is crucial to engender agency. So liberty is the focus, equality is the scope, and accountability gives it teeth, means that gives it a real effect. Accountability is the antidote to authoritarian regimes. And I'm going through it, wrapping it up quickly, and that brings me to what do we want as the Iranians in Iran, in diaspora. From what I've been reading and what I've been collecting is that we want freedom, and we went through what layers of freedom are out there. We want democracy. We want true representation. We don't want pre-selected people from a certain group to be our so-called representatives. We want pluralism. We want every ethnic group has their own language, be able to be represented from ethnic minority groups to ethnic religious group, ethnic minority, sexual minorities. Any group needs to be present. And we also want secularism, and that's the point was also emphasized by Turej. We also need liberalism, because that encompasses all of these points related to freedom, democracy, pluralism, and secularism. And here is what we can learn from the Dutch liberalism. The Dutch liberalism also praises freedom, puts it at the center of every action. It also emphasizes on the responsibility of the individual towards the society, and that is combined with reciprocity. So me as an individual in the context of the community have a responsibility towards the whole society. I give it a wrap now, and this is my kind of a shout out to my university for providing this opportunity for the students to always, at the beginning of the year, to say, what do they want to achieve and what is their wish? And my wish is to build partnerships across sectors to create a balanced society. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. We're moving to question round. There are 2 microphones. Yes? Mine, no.
You're welcome to come and take a seat here. And then
Thank you for adding especially also the point of responsibility and accountability to this issue of freedom, and actually also answering one of the questions Turaj asked, not what they don't want, but what do they want. So you already answered some of that. Are there already some questions in the hall? Please raise your hand if you want to ask a question, and then wait for the microphone. Maybe there's also the discussion online, so people can add questions to the chat on YouTube. No, nothing yet. Nobody here. Is Magdier Golru again joining us too online? Was there a question? Yes, please.
Good evening.
And maybe you can also say to whom the question is.
Thank you so much for the very interesting and insightful presentation. I'm here. So I really enjoyed that you said what you want, so that's very clear, but that's very different to what is happening right now in Iran. So it's quite the opposite. So how would you see that happening? Because it seems like it's opposite. How do you see this implementing, like democracy, pluralism, freedom of expression? Seems so, it seems such a different world. And do you think it's just putting another type of model in front and copying that? I mean, how do you see the road to actually implementing all these values and forms of governance?
Thank you very much for your question. What I presented as what we want is not including the part that how do we get there. This is the vision, and how to get to the vision is a long process, as also Turej referred to. It's not going to happen in a month or two. It takes quite some time, maybe years, and that's called the transition process. There are ways for the transition. There are coalitions being built and made within the diaspora in different parts of the world, and they are collaborating. And the hardest element is where does the Islamic Republic people will go afterwards. Usually when a regime falls is that the leaders flee the country. And in the Iranian context, because half of the people in the government are on the terrorist list themselves, they can't leave the country. So my suggestion is to give them asylum in Venezuela, because they have a very good relation with Venezuela, or Syria, or Russia, or China. These are the places that they are not in contradiction with them. This is a suggestion, obviously not very much liked by many people. I do want every single person on IRGC to receive a free trial in terms of the crimes they committed. I am advocate for the public forgiveness, because there are 10,000 people just on the terrorist list of Canada, of the IRGC members, and there are 120,000 people on the payroll of IRGC inside Iran. I don't want any of them to be executed. I want them to receive free trial, and if they decide to put down their weapons and join the people, I personally, wholeheartedly would welcome it. But I'm not the one, and it's the collective that needs to make that decision. So from where we are now, till where these items that I listed, freedom, democracy, pluralism, and so on, there is a path, and that needs to be decided collectively. That transition has to happen collectively.
Yes, go ahead.
All right. My question goes to entire panel. I happened to be in Iran around the same time when Mahsa Amini was killed. So I treat the whole case a little bit personally, but my question is that do you see that Islamic regime actually could fall within our lifetime? Because the protests are going fairly strong, but this is not the first time when people are actually raising to the Islamic regime in Iran. So do you see it happening within our lifetime?
You have to turn on the microphone, yes.
You know, as I mentioned, this is a regime that create crisis and live in crisis. So you're right, if you look at the history of 43 years, you see different type of social protest here. The lower class, middle class, with a class dimension, gender dimension, ethnic dimension. This is a source of a different type of protest we have. If you look at the very present situation today, is that in the past 40 years, the country, the regime, never was in such a deepest crisis is today. Look at what's happening to the European Union with the nuclear disarmament, international relationship, fight in Syria, in Iraq, and finally, international dimension supporting Russia. So this amalgamation of these things, okay, point is that, is it manageable? Is the regime able to manage this? Let me just say something as a social historian. A revolutionary situation not necessarily ends to the revolution in any country. This is a fact. You can suppress a revolution. You can do that. I mean, we have seen in different countries that there was a balance between the ruler and ruled. The ruler could not really overthrow the ruler, and the ruler could not, could not suppress the ruled. So this is happening, and this goes on and on and on till we end up with a, such we call it, non-state situation. I can give you many examples. So what's happening at the moment is that there are sections of the establishment leaving the establishment and joining the reform or revolutionary movement. I mean, if you look at what's happening the last 10 days, mentioned, the very, very revolutionary prime minister, Mousavi, and his entourage left the government, turned back to the regime. The reformist prime minister, Khatami, said there is no way to reform. The reform is ended with a failure. So there are many individuals or institutions within the establishment that they say there is no future for this regime. This is a regime with no future. So the problem is that how to move from very today to next step. The question is that, are we moving from A to B, A today and B goody-goody tomorrow? No, definitely not. This is very, 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 obvious. The history of Iranian society and Iranian history shows that there's no way to go from A to B. There are different steps in between. Some of these steps not be welcome, but the majority of the people or minority of the people. But finally, I think, there's no future. The engulf between the people and the state is very, very deep. I don't see any, unless, for example, if you say that the regime is able to say goodbye to international crisis, to set up the relationship with the United States, to end up with slogans of the death to Israel, and to limit their support for the regional terrorist organization and groups, and then this is not Islamic Republic anymore.
You already mentioned the challenges in the speech. Are you hopeful?
Absolutely, absolutely. I want to combine that with the question, yes, I absolutely believe that in our lifetime, we'll see the change in Iran. And a couple of years ago, I wrote an article that Islamic Republic is a mule of all political systems. For Iranian translation, is qatir. And why did I pick that term is that mule is a very common animal in Iran, and it's a breed between donkey and a horse. It has the best characteristics of the both animals, so it makes it very stubborn, very hardworking, very strong, but it doesn't have the capacity to reproduce. So Islamic Republic can never reproduce anything that ensures its continuity because of the way it is set up, because of its limited structure in terms of who is allowed in and who is not allowed, and how they reproduce the system within themselves. There is no viable option to replace Khamenei when he dies. He's 80-something years old. Someday, he's gonna die. in our lifetime. So who is going to replace him? IRGC as a collective is an option, but with the limited opportunities that IRGC has now, if they are fully put on sanctions list, terrorist list, which hopefully will happen on Monday next week, they don't have any other income, so to say. The Iran deal back in 2015 really gave a bloodline to Islamic Republic, more importantly to IRGC. If we don't start that bloodline again, that lifeline again for IRGC, with all the conversations that, yeah, if we don't start reviving the Iran deal, they go develop nuclear bombs. I am a believer they already have it. The point is, how are we going to prevent it from having more casualties on it? So yes, I am hopeful, and yes, we are going to see it in our lifetimes. For me, the most important question is how to achieve that without the least number of casualties, especially of people who are in the streets fighting for their freedom.
So the movement is really bigger than ever, so it seems, but the repression is too, seemingly. Magdiel, what is your point on this? Are you hopeful that change is really going to come?
Answer, my friends, everything that was necessary. But I want to add something. That I think the revolution has been happening. It's a process, and it started not just 5 months ago. It was started many years ago, but it's continued until now. But there are some things that is very important I want to mention. It's that this kind of government, dictatorship government, have power until that time the citizen and people believe their power. And most of the people in Iran believe the Iranian regime, the Islamic regime, is the most powerful government in the world. And the intelligence service cover all the detail in our life. It's like a Soviet or some other country. But now the most important achievement so far is that the people break the red line. The government arrested more than 20,000 of people, killed at least 500 people during just 5 months, and executed some young people. But continue until now. If I want to say just about the university, when I was in the university around 20 years ago, when some students become education ban, or they have to change the university as a punishment, the student movement stopped. But now the student movement doesn't stop so far. It continues with many arresting, with many killing, but it's continue. And that's why I think everything changed in Iran, because people don't afraid the government like before. And it's the most important achievement for people who live under dictatorship governments.
Thank you. And next question, yes, online. You have the microphone.
Yes, thanks. So maybe an open question for all of you. So if any of you prefers to answer it, I'd be grateful. I wish you talked about how you see the future for this revolution, how we can bring true democracy to Iran.
I can start. I believe the first step is to be transparent. Every party that is involved, every group, every opposition that is involved, being very transparent about their agenda. And inclusivity is the key here. If we start saying, I'm not going to talk to this group or that group, or this group is not important, or this group has this ties, I'm not going to talk to, that's not going to work. Transparency and inclusivity is quite important. And as Duraj and I both refer to knowing what we want is also a key. Is just saying that weg met mullahs or down with mullahs is not sufficient. Not wanting something is not giving way to what do we actually want. So defining that vision that we have for our future, our collective future, is quite important. And bringing everybody on board and being transparent is the key in my view.
Turaj, you also mentioned the need of leadership. Is there? Can you turn on your microphone?
This is something that the management of the revolution matters. You know, revolution is not a university classroom. You go and talk about Hannah Arendt and Bettelheim and Hegel. You know, these are nice. We have learned, we have studied these, and we know the past of the country. We know the experience of the movements all over the world. What is really matter is the management of the revolution. Management of the revolution means you have to put all the jigsaw of these pictures together and to use the most potential of the contributors and pacify those who are against these movements. This is really a matter. A good prime minister, a good president, a good monarch that stays in history are all good managers. So this is really matter. What you need a leadership, not individual leadership. I'm not talking about Shah or prime minister or this and that. I think about the management in plural terms. You need something that, to manage the revolution. Every step. You have to have a vision of what you're going to do, step by step, from A1 to A2, A3, A4. Everyday life should be matter for you. This needs, that's why I said, we need, Iranian, they have loads of homework to do, and it takes time. You know, I remember, I heard that in the constitutional revolution in Iran, there was somebody in Tabriz said, if the constitution comes to Iran, we have got a kebab of one vajab. No, it was not, kebab of this. Constitution needs, work. After the constitution, we had a lesser despotism, istibdad saghir. And the constitutionalists realized how difficult it is to make a revolution and how difficult it is to keep the revolution. So it's a matter of the management, but I'm very optimistic, but I don't have any illusion in a matter of months, but I've got optimistic because I see the potential there. There is a generation who knows that they deserve a better life than they have. And they've got their own language, their own vocabulary. This should be considered.
Okay, so there's a chance now in the management spheres. The Cultural Revolution was already happening, as Magdi also mentioned, in the back.
I thank you for your informative presentation. Well, actually, for me, it's not anymore a question how this government gonna be gone or how it's gonna be destroyed. For me, it's obvious that they destroyed themselves already, and well, they have shown a massive violence against their people, and they also passed the red lines, their Islamic red lines. I guess they have lost the trust of their people, the respect of their people, and the love from their people. And well, without respect, without trust, without love, there would be no reason to stay. Well, the big question in my mind that is kind of also scary and makes me worry about my country, about my land, is that how it's gonna be after the revolution. Well, you studied history, Mr. Tabaki, and well, we were always in danger of wars from our neighbors, from Iraq, from Ottoman Empire or Turkey, or And today, well, Pakistan is very powerful. They have nuclear bombs. So how you expect the region, the Middle East, after the Islamic Revolution, after the Islamic Republic, because, well, they massively invest in the neighbors, in their neighbors, and they made very good relations with military groups. They also have shown interference in the systems of other countries, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq. And well, I can say that they made the land secure for themselves, for their politic and strategic goals and purposes. So what do you expect going to be the region, the Middle East, after the Islamic Republic? Thank you.
Shall I go?
The hope comes after the revolution.
You know,
And the question is for the vision after the revolution.
Yeah. You know, there is nobody can give you a blank check. You know, nobody can give. What's happening will be rosy, goody, good, everything fine. No, it's not that. I mean, you should work hard to make a revolution. Agency matter. You know, try to think about different agencies. Class matter, gender matter, ethnicity matter. All these matter. Try to bring people into the street. I'm not talking about the street in physical terms, means in action. This is really matter, not to pacify the people. You know, we had many examples. For example, what's happened in the Soviet Union, the fall of the Soviet Union. I was there doing my PhD, and I realized how the elite, the corrupt elite of the Soviet Union, pacified the people, and finally they created a state that is top-down corrupt, a continuation of the corruption of the Soviet Union. How can you give agency to the all voiceless people? This is the action, this is the homework of activists like you, this generation. So here, something that means, you can change the fate of the revolution by bringing different agency. Women in the street, not say that, okay, for people in spite of the people. No. People's matter in the street. So here, if you just think about the successful revolution, like, for example, you have many in Poland, in Czechoslovakia, or to some extent in Georgia, you see that, the people, they never left the street. And as Somaye was saying very rightly, that, what is really matter in every step of the movement, don't think about it. No, we don't discuss now. Let's discuss after the revolution. No way. We discuss about every aspect of the revolution now. And we want accountability now, not after the revolution. This is something that you can guarantee more and more to the outcome of the revolution.
Yeah, maybe Mahdi wants to add something.
Mahdi, maybe you want to add something? The next generations were mentioned, so there's some homework for young people. How do you relate to that? So the vision.
Yeah. I think we have more opportunity to have a successful revolution because we have experienced Islamic revolution around 44 years ago, and we can learn many things from our mistake. It was not just, I want to say, our mistake. It's as an Iranian mistake. And we can learn many things from that time, and especially from Arab Spring revolutions, we can learn many things from that. And that's why I think the opportunity for having a successful revolution can be imagined. And about the Middle East without Islamic regime, I'm sure it would be better for all the people, because most of you know about the Islamic regime send weapons to the Yemen, to the Syria, and nowadays the Ukraine. So not just Middle East, the world without Islamic regime can be more peace. And if the Islamic regime wasn't at the Middle East, how Taliban can overcome again to Afghanistan. That's why I think the Middle East without Islamic regime is better for all the people all over the world, and especially people and especially women in Middle East. Because without the Islamic regime, the Islamic propaganda in the world can decrease, and people can describe what's the true Islam, what's the rules of Islam, what's the political of Islam. And so without the Islamic regime propaganda, without Iran's oil that support Islamic propaganda, everything can be better than now, I think.
Thank you, Magdi. There's one more question. I think it's the last one. Oh, I'm sorry. Online? No, not
Online. We have one more online question.
okay.
And,
Go ahead.
I'm not sure.
Yeah, and then there's one here in the audience. Yes.
What is
First
the
online.
role of the EU, academia, and diaspora community in helping facilitate this revolution and build the blueprint for future democracy of Iran?
The academics? Yeah, look, for the last, for the last 4 or 5 months, 4 months at least, I can say there are a number of conferences, workshops, Zoom meetings, debate on every aspect of the revolution, agencies, labor, non-labor, and women, and subaltern position, laboring poor, and all these things. Different aspects of the agencies has been discussed, and the future, the possible future, the experience of the other countries considered. What was a failure of this revolution, other revolution, what can be learned from the other revolution, from Tunisian revolution, Algerian revolution, Egyptian, Czechoslovakian, Polish, and all these things, and even the European revolutions. It was not. Still. The Iranians need to learn a lot from what's happening the last 400 years in this country. What you see in this country is not achievement of the last 50 years. It's a centuries building what we have in the Netherlands. So these should be learned, and there is a discussion in academia. But in addition to that, there are roundtable discussion everywhere. Almost every week, I'm invited either by television or by academia to discuss about different aspects together with colleagues.
Thank you, Turaj. Indeed, academics, Iranian academics in diaspora are quite active. They are involved in many different discussions. But the interesting part for me in the question was that it was putting EU, academia, and then there was a third, the diaspora, all in one line. Each of these groups have a very different role. Academics mentioned people, Iranians who are not in academia, which a lot of us are in academia, who are not, they can raise awareness in their workplaces about what's happening. But specifically about EU, yes, they are putting IRGC on a terrorist list. That's a huge step. That's a very great step towards the right direction. And a lot of members of the European Parliament, but also members of Dutch Parliament, member of Swedish Parliament, Belgian Parliament, they are also really enforcing this process. What I would love to see EU, US, other powers do is to look at Iran and the Islamic Republic not as a political situation of how can we deal with this government through sanctions or economy or whatever. They need to look at the situation in Iran at this moment as a hostage situation. The people of Iran are taken hostage by Islamic Republic. Every day, there is a chance that they bring somebody forward and execute it. That's definition of a hostage situation, that the safety of the people are at imminent risk. And with that in mind, we need to start thinking what is the strategy we want to develop with Islamic Republic. As the same with the article I referred to, Iran Islamic Republic being a mule, everything in the history of political science has been based on political systems that existed before, and here is the antidote to it. Islamic Republic never existed before, so we don't have a history and idea of how to deal with as the Europe, as America, as other places. We don't have a handbook, we don't have a guidebook on how to deal with a country that has Islamic Republic system. Iran established it, and other countries in the region, some of them followed. And because we don't have a handbook, so everything else that worked before does not necessarily work for Iran. And that's why we need to come up with new processes, new ways of approach. And at this moment, in my opinion, the way to go about is to think that this is a hostage situation. How do we deal with a hostage situation? And how do we secure the safety of people who are in imminent risk of execution or being shot dead in the street or being kidnapped, simply kidnapped in the street, not just in the streets of Tehran, Iran, but streets of Europe, streets of America. Maybe you've heard about the different attempts to kidnap one of the prominent women activists in the States, that there were several plans to kidnap her, transfer her to Venezuela, as I referred to, and bring her to Iran for prosecution. For the anniversary of Iran's revolution, which was a few days ago, there was a gathering in Iran, as the government every year forces people from different groups to go to, and there was a slogan saying, Masih, you are the name of the woman activist that I refer to. Your place is in a bag, and it's reference to, we put you in a bag as if you are kidnapped and we will take you. So there is a direct threat to the life of people inside and outside Iran, Iranian people inside and outside Iran, and there is no other way to describe it than it is a hostage situation. How do Europe deals with a hostage situation is the question that we need to put forward.
Okay, well, I wanted to move to the last question, if that's
This
okay.
year, the university, we are academia. I remember our colleagues, academics in prison in Iran. Saeed Madani, other sociologists, historians. Today, they are in prison and they are working for this program.
Thank you. The last question.
My question is to Ms. Somaya Dehban. You made a comparison of the ideal political system for Iran in the future with the current political system, the Liberal Party of the Dutch liberalism. But do you think that this political system will be ideal for future Iran, keeping in mind that being the Liberal Party being at work almost for a couple of years already, and we see that a level of support from the government neglects towards the society. Do you think that this is really the ideal political system for the future of Iran, and it won't lead the country towards more poverty?
It's a very interesting question. It's sad that it's towards the end of it. I make a few points. I'm more than happy to have a conversation after the end of the ceremony. My suggestion in the presentation was not that Iran future government should be a liberal government. That was not the claim I made. I said that we can learn from the philosophy of Dutch liberal parties, which include freedom, responsibility, and reciprocity. These three pillars of liberalism, Dutch liberalism, because in America, liberalism has a very different meaning. So in the Dutch context, based on the Dutch philosophy of liberalism, these three elements would help to ensure that what I mentioned as what we want, democracy, freedom, and so on, is hold to a higher level and is ensure that we are going to protect these views that we have. About the Dutch context, well, here we have a coalition. There is no one party that is the government. For the past couple of years has been 4 or 5 parties running, being the government. So the responsibility of what happens in the society is the responsibility of all the parties in the coalition. Some of them are liberals, some of them are Christians, some of them are more Christian, so that needs to be taken into account, that what has caused the results of what we see in the Dutch society. It's the conversation is not about what the Dutch government has done to the Dutch society, so I won't get into that element.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. And indeed, we have drinks after this, so we can discuss things further. There are free drinks in the Refter. If you go out on the back and you go to the right and move to the end of the hall, it's there. I do want to finish with asking our panelists for one short take-home message for the young people here concerning their involvement, or what can I do, or what could I do, or how can I get involved in this whole situation and in the protest.
And just to be sure, by what can I do, you mean the Dutch public, or?
Yeah, me personally, or a young student, or I mean, we've listened and we go home and we have more worries and we follow the news, and then the news stops, and then next year maybe we invite you back again to see what happened. But
yeah. My recommendation, my call to action, so to say, is to follow the news from different sources. Don't stick with one, just what BBC says or what just NOS says. Read several news platforms and read different interpretations. Sometimes I see an article in nationwide newspapers in the Netherlands that is interviewing Iran's lobbyists. And they are saying, yeah, a revolution is dead, nothing is happening, and this is finished. Read other, that's an opinion. They are entitled to it. Not that I believe they should get the platform to speak, because part of the freedom dimension in terms of liberty, accountability, and what was the second one? I forgot myself. But part of it is to be sure that the ones who are in power do not overpower what information is being transferred to the general public. So read several newspapers, follow different Twitter accounts. The Fresh News is there, and make a educated comparison. Don't fall with, oh, this is my friend, so if this person is saying it is correct. Read several news outlets and make an educated comparison between them, and make your own opinion about it.
Magda, you from Sweden, do you have a take-home message for us?
Yes, I want to continue Somaya's word. As a lobby mentioned, the lobby of Islamic regime. Islamic regime make a fake image of Iran and people in Iran. As I mentioned, as the young girl and students who wear hijab and pray for the leadership. It's a fake message to the world. And that's why it's important the Islamic regime have a successful and powerful propaganda with the oil money in all over the world, in university, in social media, in the different kind of media. That's why it's important. If you want to know real thing about the Iran, go through the different media and you information from different sources. Another thing is that it's good for some young people know that feminist and human rights, it's a unique concept. And you can't say in the feminist in Western country and white country is the equality, and in the Middle East it's something else, and it's a part of their culture. Execution or child marriage or any other problem is part of culture in Middle East. Some people try make this idea after many years in our minds that the Middle East can't have a democracy. But all of us all over the world deserve to live under democracy and freedom. So it's very important. We believe human rights. It's unique for all kinds of people all over the world. It doesn't matter. We are white or come from Middle East or some other country.
Turaj, you already mentioned the universal slogan, and then it's a universal issue, so it concerns us all. And you mentioned the importance of history, but do you have another?
Yeah, I think politics chiefly is negotiations of elite on the top for the short-term achievements. I think, we should give the voice to the voiceless people and encourage them to take agencies in different forms. This is really matter. Think about the youth, think about the labor, think about subaltern, think about the women. And these are really matters by listening to these voices, making the voiceless to have their voice, and put their pressure on our politician to change.
Thank you very much. I hope we did contribute to giving the voiceless a voice here. I thank you very much for your insights in the panel. I thank you all for being here and joining the discussion, also the people at home. I hope you enjoyed it. We do have the drinks in the rest, as I said, so we can talk a bit more. And I have some gifts here for the panelists. Thank you very much.
Hello, great spot. Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.